When the government seized Elias Monroe's land to build a suburban utopia, they called it progress. Elias called it a death sentence. For over 100 years, his family had passed down one chilling responsibility: never let anyone dig. But no one listened. Now, dozens are missing. Streets are caving in. And somewhere beneath the manicured lawns and cul-de-sacs, something has awakened. What did Elias's family trap underground, and why did they think it would save humanity, not destroy it? Elias Monroe had lived alone on the edge of Langston County for most of his 53 years, tending to his father's land with the silent, reverent patience of a man who understood it better than anyone alive. The 300 acres he called home weren't just property. They were legacy, inheritance, and, most importantly, a responsibility. Locals referred to the place as Monroe Hollow, and even before the government got involved, no one liked venturing too deep into it. Stories circulated, about the birds that wouldn't fly over it, about the strange metallic hum sometimes heard at night, and about how the land always seemed to breathe in the winter, puffing up frozen mist from the cracked soil like an exhale from the earth's chest. Elias never explained these things. But when federal agents showed up with blueprints and bulldozers, he did warn them: build anywhere you want in Langston, just not here. Something sleeps beneath this ground. Something we were told never to wake. The land was seized through eminent domain within weeks. Elias, regarded as a paranoid recluse, was escorted from his property by men in suits who didn't bother to hear the rest of his warnings. In a matter of days, the area was cleared, and construction began on a government-backed housing initiative called Horizon Ridge, a supposedly eco-conscious development promising affordable, high-tech homes for 100 families. Officials paraded the project in the media as a symbol of national progress, rebuilding trust in rural infrastructure and employment. But as the project gained traction, no one seemed to notice that the land itself resisted. Surveying drones malfunctioned. Foundation diggers hit impenetrable stone just 10 feet down. Trees, once easy to fell, refused to rot, even when exposed to the elements for weeks. One crew member swore he saw a light under the soil, pulsing like a heartbeat, but he was dismissed and quietly reassigned. Elias watched from afar, camped in the woods bordering his former land. Every night, he lit a fire and laid out the same 3 items: a rusted compass, a pocket Bible missing the last 10 pages, and a photograph of a man in a 1920s miner's helmet, standing in front of an iron door embedded in stone. On the back, scribbled in his father's trembling hand, were 4 words: never let them build. He had no phone, no internet, no way to stop the inevitable. But he kept a journal, one he planned to leave behind when the trap finally sprang open. And buried under the journal, wrapped in oilskin and marked with a symbol resembling an Ouroboros split in half, was a small black key that didn't fit anything in his home, but matched a lock buried 70 feet beneath the housing project's Lot 17. By the 3rd week of construction, strange things began happening. A newly poured foundation at Lot 17 cracked overnight in a perfect spiral. A crew leader fell through a hole that wasn't there an hour before and fractured his ribs. And a drone mapping the neighborhood grid crashed, its last captured image showing a symbol in the dirt identical to the one on Elias's key. But the officials insisted these were random accidents. They issued no delays. They didn't want paranoia to interfere with public confidence. And so the homes went up, one after another, until all 100 stood tall, identical, and lifeless, waiting for families that didn't know they were stepping into a century-old warning. Elias returned one last time, walking the newly paved road named Monroe Lane. He stood quietly in front of Lot 17, ignoring the construction team who threatened to call security. He didn't protest. He simply looked down at the soil and whispered, "This was never meant to be touched." As he walked away, the streetlights flickered. A dog howled from somewhere distant. And beneath the ground, the hum began again, this time louder. Elias didn't start digging into the past until he was 17, the night his father had his first and only stroke. As the old man lay speechless in the hospital, unable to utter more than a rasp, Elias went home to pack a bag, and found the first clue hidden in the back of the old cellar. A steel box welded shut, marked with the initials HM and scorched around the edges. It took him hours to cut it open, and when he did, what spilled out wasn't treasure or family heirlooms, but dread. Inside were yellowed letters, brittle photographs, 2 topographical maps from 1921, and a leather-bound journal that smelled of coal and motor oil. The journal, written by Henry Monroe, his great-grandfather, documented something Elias had never heard his family speak of: an entire town buried under the very land the government had just seized. A town not listed on any map. A town called Gallows Creek. According to the journal, Gallows Creek had once been a booming mining settlement, set up quickly and secretly during the tail end of the First World War. But what they were mining wasn't coal or gold, it was something else. Something pulled from deep below the crust, described only in cryptic phrases, like obsidian, but warm, metal that sings, and veins that pulse even after extraction. Henry had been one of the original site engineers, brought in by a shadowy branch of the military identified only as Department K. The miners were told little, only that what they extracted would serve national defense. But the deeper they went, the more unstable the town became. Cattle were born with translucent skin. Men who stayed underground too long emerged whispering in dead languages. And one night, the mine itself, Shaft E, opened into a cavern not in the blueprints. The 3 who descended into it were never seen again. After that, the government pulled out. But not before sealing the entire town beneath a concrete sarcophagus and detonating the hillside to bury it forever. Only a few families were told the truth. Those closest to the incident were either paid off, relocated, or disappeared. But Henry Monroe refused both money and silence. He stayed, taking an oath passed down through blood, to ensure no one ever built atop Gallows Creek again. His descendants kept that promise, each son inheriting the same instructions. Protect the land, trust no outsider, and if the ground ever hums, run. The journal included coordinates to the sealed shaft and detailed a mechanism designed to prevent unauthorized access. It wasn't just concrete that kept it closed, it was a failsafe, a pressure lock system that would rupture if disturbed incorrectly. But the most unsettling detail was a map of the surrounding acres overlaid with concentric red rings, like a heat map of danger. Lot 17 was directly in the center of the innermost ring. In the years that followed his discovery, Elias learned to read between the lines of old family letters and coded records. His grandfather's notebooks were filled with annotations on soil conductivity, weather patterns, and electromagnetic anomalies. It seemed every Monroe before him had been a quiet sentinel, watching the land not out of tradition, but necessity. One document, marked confidential, recall protocol, outlined a plan by Department K to return if specific environmental signals were detected. According to Henry's journal, those signals had stopped around 1952, but Elias's father had started seeing flickers again around 1991. He'd written a single entry that Elias would later memorize by heart: "If they return, it's already too late." Elias had tried reaching out to local officials twice in the 90s, hinting at geological instability. He even forged a report warning of radioactive contamination. But the town had no interest in old legends. The land was labeled stable by federal inspectors, and Monroe Hollow was deemed suitable for development and modernization. By the time the Horizon Ridge plans resurfaced in 2023, it was clear someone had found old Department K records and assumed the risk had passed. They didn't understand that the Monroes hadn't been hiding something dangerous, they had been imprisoning it. Not long after construction began, Elias visited his mother's grave. He hadn't spoken to her in 20 years, ever since she'd walked out and left him and his father alone to watch the land. Her last words to him, written in a bitter letter, were "Burn the past before it burns you." But as he stood there in the drizzle, he realized it wasn't just about family trauma. She'd been afraid. She knew what the trap was. And she had chosen to flee rather than guard it. That night, Elias opened the steel hatch beneath the barn floor, something he hadn't done in over a decade. He lit the old gas lantern and descended into the limestone bunker that had been built generations ago as a monitoring station. There, along the walls, were dozens of analog instruments, seismographs, resonance monitors, and something that looked like a heartbeat reader but pulsed not in beats per minute, but in frequency waves. And for the first time since 1952, the needle moved. The hum had returned. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Horizon Ridge was bathed in artificial optimism. Shiny blue banners waving in the wind, cameras flashing, and local politicians grinning in front of model homes lined up like dolls in a showroom. The mayor called it a new dawn for Langston County, and the Secretary of Housing promised it would set a new standard for suburban living. But underneath the manicured lawns and solar-paneled rooftops, the ground was whispering. No one heard it yet. Not clearly. But the workers felt it, in the way their boots vibrated slightly after sunset, in the static that clung to their hard hats, in the dreams they started having just weeks after the first homes were erected. Most brushed it off. Stress, maybe. But the dream was always the same. Walking down into darkness, following a low mechanical chime, and seeing something vast and coiled, breathing. On the fourth week of development, the first incident occurred. Lot 22 collapsed into itself overnight, forming a crater 12 feet wide and nearly 30 feet deep. The media called it a sinkhole. Engineers called it inexplicable. The edges of the crater were too clean, the depth too sudden, and at the very bottom, rescue workers found not rock or soil, but iron. A flat, circular slab of it, marked with a pattern resembling circuitry etched by something not human. It was removed under the cover of darkness by agents in unmarked trucks. The story never aired. Soon after, the animals began acting strangely. A dog from Lot 19 refused to enter its own backyard, clawing at the front door whenever it got close. Birds flew in chaotic spirals overhead, disoriented. One homeowner woke to find hundreds of frogs sitting silently on their porch, unmoving, as if listening. Then came the malfunctions. Door locks that clicked open at 3:17 a.m. every night. Smart thermostats that reset to a constant 41 degrees, despite manual overrides. One home's AI system started speaking in a voice the family didn't recognize, intoning syllables that didn't match any known language. When they unplugged it, the voice continued through the walls. The government dispatched a small task force labeled as environmental stabilization consultants. In truth, they were private contractors, formerly employed by classified divisions in energy and defense. Among them was a geophysicist named Dr. Myra Talbot, who quickly became unnerved by her own findings. Ground-penetrating radar revealed dozens of geometric voids beneath the neighborhood, some spherical, others cylindrical, none naturally formed. Worse, many of them were shifting slightly, as if rotating on unseen axes. Myra attempted to raise the alarm, filing a confidential report to her handler that contained just one sentence: "This is not geological." She was never seen on site again. Her apartment was found abandoned 3 days later, her phone disassembled in the sink, her computer melted from the inside. Meanwhile, residents began moving into Horizon Ridge, unaware of the growing list of anomalies. A family at Lot 44 reported hearing knocking beneath their floorboards at night, in sets of 3. When they tried to film it, the camera froze on a single frame, a shadow standing at the center of their living room, visible only for 0.2 seconds. Another couple, newlyweds at Lot 73, described dreams where they stood in a mirror-lined chamber with a low ceiling and heard a voice calling their names, not once, but in loops, growing louder each night until they started sleepwalking into their backyard at midnight. One night, a maintenance worker named Devin Hart went missing. His last known location was near Lot 17, where he had been assigned to check on a recurring power outage. His body was never recovered, but his helmet was found a day later, split cleanly down the middle, with no blood, no tissue, and no sign of trauma. Just a faint metallic residue that corroded the plastic evidence bag within hours. Surveillance footage showed nothing but static, and the development central data server glitched so badly that the entire community's smart systems went offline for 36 hours. In response, the Horizon Ridge management team tried to shift blame. Public statements blamed external cyber interference, while internal memos, leaked to a conspiracy blog, referenced terms like containment breach and resonance inversion. Meanwhile, security guards were replaced with men in black uniforms with no visible insignia, and helicopters began circling the area nightly without explanation. Elias, watching all of this unfold from the perimeter woods, began writing in his father's journal again. "They are building into the center," he scrawled with shaking hands. "The lock is weakening. The hum is constant now." He stayed mostly hidden but broke his silence once, slipping an envelope under the windshield of a local reporter named Kendra Vale, whose stories had once exposed corruption in the Langston oil scandal. Inside the envelope were copies of his great-grandfather's maps, photographs of Gallows Creek's original mine shaft, and a note: "They think they built on empty land. But they built on a door." Kendra hesitated before publishing anything. She feared it would tank her credibility, branding her another conspiracy nut. But as more residents contacted her, sharing chilling stories, unexplainable phenomena, and even audio recordings of that strange subterranean chime, she knew something bigger was unraveling. She filed her first story with the headline, "The Development That Shouldn't Exist." It went viral in less than 12 hours. That same night, 6 homes across Horizon Ridge simultaneously lost power. A red glow emanated from their basements, where no lighting fixtures existed. Residents fled into the streets, phones recording, as the ground beneath them began to pulse. When emergency services arrived, the glow had vanished. But something else had taken its place. Carved into the pavement outside Lot 17, in letters 3 feet high, were the words, "Some doors open inward." The article detonated through the internet like a spark on dry grass. Within hours of Kendra Vale publishing her exposé, forums exploded, local channels scrambled to cover the growing panic, and Horizon Ridge's PR department went into overdrive. But behind closed doors, officials weren't crafting apologies, they were constructing a firewall. Every platform that carried Kendra's story experienced technical disruptions. Her post on X was flagged for misinformation and deleted. Her blog was seized through a backdoor clause in its hosting agreement. And when she tried to speak on a livestream, her feed went black within 60 seconds. Still, screenshots spread like spores, and the phrase "the development that shouldn't exist" became a digital ghost, reposted faster than it could be erased. People wanted answers, but all they got were denials and silence. The government refused interviews. The real estate company behind Horizon Ridge pulled their site offline. And all inquiries were met with the same canned response: routine environmental testing is being conducted. Residents are safe. There is no cause for concern. Inside the community, though, concern had metastasized into dread. Families started packing up and leaving, some in the middle of the night. They left belongings behind, half-eaten meals still on tables, lights still on, toys scattered in driveways. The problem wasn't that they were scared of what might happen. The problem was that things were already happening. One child disappeared for 6 hours, only to be found asleep in a crawlspace filled with soot, whispering to someone who wasn't there. A retired teacher in Lot 6 filmed her own reflection turning away from her in the mirror. Her neighbors found the footage playing on repeat in her living room the next morning, but she was gone. Her front door still locked from the inside. Kendra received an anonymous tip from someone claiming to work on the containment oversight team. The message was encrypted, routed through so many proxies she couldn't trace its origin. It read, "It isn't just old mining debris. You're sitting on something engineered. Think deeper. Think designed. They didn't just bury it. They implanted it." Attached was a photo taken from a subterranean scanner, showing what looked like an enormous coil structure shaped like an embryonic spiral, larger than a football field, embedded horizontally in the earth. Its edges were sharp, metallic, and unnaturally symmetrical. It was artificial. And alive. Kendra raced to find Elias. She drove to Monroe Hollow in the middle of the night, headlights cutting through fog like knives. She found him by the fire, surrounded by journals, blueprints, and one odd thing: a thick, sealed envelope with her name already written on it. Elias wasn't surprised to see her. "You're the first one who's listening," he said. "But you're already too late." He told her everything. About Gallows Creek. About Department K. About the real function of Horizon Ridge. It wasn't just built on a prison, it was built to act as a beacon. The homes, the smart tech, the underground cabling, it all formed a grid. And the grid, when complete, would trigger the lock. Not break it. Wake it. Back in town, the last remaining families were confronted with blockades. Black SUVs with government plates lined the exits of the development. Anyone who tried to leave was met with polite but firm men in black tactical gear. "Please return to your homes." This is a precautionary lockdown. The residents weren't given choices. Some obeyed. Some resisted. A few simply vanished in the night, homes found empty, no signs of struggle, no open doors. The blockades didn't budge. Cellular service dropped. Internet access throttled down to unusable speeds. The community was being cut off. Not for protection, but to contain the awakening. Meanwhile, deep within the remains of the original Gallows Creek shaft, seismic tremors began to register in surrounding counties. The media blamed fracking. Scientists whispered about geothermal instability. But the ones monitoring the pulse at the epicenter knew the truth. The hum had become a rhythm. And rhythm implied a pattern. And pattern implied intent. Elias gave Kendra the key, the black one marked with the split Ouroboros. If it opens, he said, you run. You don't fight it. You don't study it. You leave everyone and run. She didn't ask what it opened. She already knew. Before leaving, he handed her a torn page from his great-grandfather's journal. On it were 4 words in bold, angry ink: "We didn't build it." That same night, an emergency alert flashed across televisions in Langston County. It was short and sterile. Shelter in place. Extreme weather event imminent. Avoid Horizon Ridge. But the sky was clear. No wind. No clouds. Just stars. And then, at precisely 3:17 a.m., every home in the development powered on simultaneously. Lights on. Thermostats set. Speakers blaring a low, modulated tone that made pets shriek and humans collapse. From beneath Lot 17, the ground cracked, not in chaos, but in deliberate, geometric lines. A hexagonal fissure split open, glowing from within. No one above ground knew what had activated. But something below did. And now, it was listening. It began with silence. Not just the absence of noise, but an active suppression of it. At precisely 3:33 a.m., every insect in Horizon Ridge stopped buzzing. Dogs ceased barking mid-howl, birds froze in mid-air or crashed to the ground with limp wings, and the wind, which had been moving gently through the trees moments earlier, fell utterly still. Residents who had been awake found their ears ringing, as if the air pressure had shifted, crushing something unseen against the walls of their homes. Those who slept began to twitch violently in their beds, mouths opening in perfect unison as if something had reached into their dreams and yanked out their breath. A few managed to stumble outside, disoriented, clutching their skulls and whispering phrases they had no memory of learning. The ground was humming again, but this time it was more than a vibration. It was a voice. Lot 17 split open with mechanical precision. It wasn't an explosion, but a calculated unfurling, like gears turning inside the earth to peel back a hatch sealed for generations. From the abyss beneath, a faint red mist began to seep upward, not like smoke but like breath, warm, pulsing, aware. Surveillance drones still circling the development zoomed in automatically, their AI protocols overridden. What they captured sent 2 satellite feeds offline and triggered classified countermeasures in 3 federal agencies. Beneath the houses, beneath the stone and sediment, something enormous and segmented was shifting. It wasn't crawling. It was unfolding. From the perimeter, Elias could see the change in the skyline. Not in height, but in color. The stars above Horizon Ridge were blinking, not because of clouds, but because something was reflecting them from below. He pulled out his journal and marked the date. Engagement event confirmed, he wrote, hand trembling. Phase 1 breach successful. Patterns match grandfather's predictions. The mechanism is awake. In the town beyond the perimeter, residents miles away began to feel their appliances shorting out. Phones refused to hold charge. Vehicles stalled in the middle of highways. One power plant operator described seeing a single word flash across his control panel, return, before every monitor shattered inward as if imploded from the inside. Something was affecting the electrical grid on a massive scale, and all of it pointed to a source, the development project that now no one would claim responsibility for. Inside Horizon Ridge, the people who hadn't fled or been forced into quarantine were beginning to break. Not from panic, but from connection. A shared dream took hold. One resident, a woman who had never spoken Arabic, suddenly began reciting a passage from a forgotten dialect that hadn't been uttered in over 2,000 years. Another man walked calmly into the middle of the newly opened fissure and began weeping, not in fear but in awe. He described feeling invited. When Kendra tried to reach him through a megaphone from outside the barricade, he turned to the camera and smiled, but his eyes had changed, now full black, and reflecting not her face but a spiraling, shifting symbol that pulsed with each blink. The trap, as Elias understood it, had always been a paradox. It wasn't designed to kill what was buried. It was designed to lull it. The grid built atop the ancient containment zone was a cage of resonance, a lattice of vibration and electromagnetic suppression. The homes, the smart devices, the infrastructure, they all played a part in the hymn of forgetting. But whoever revived the project misread the records. They hadn't rebuilt the cage, they had disabled it, mistaking it for waste and redundancy. The pattern wasn't neutralized. It had been paused. Until now. Military response arrived late. Not out of negligence, but paralysis. The few boots that entered Horizon Ridge never came back out. Body cams returned jumbled footage, impossible architecture beneath the town, rooms that rotated in defiance of physics, humanoid silhouettes that flickered in and out of existence, and symbols, always the symbols, crawling across the walls like living calligraphy. Command lost contact with every unit in under 3 minutes. Kendra managed to hack one remaining drone feed before the signal went dead. What she saw was not human, and not entirely alien. It was a mechanism shaped like a serpentine coil, pulsating as if alive, embedded into a biomechanical chamber with no apparent origin. And at its center, a spire, thin and glistening, extending into infinity, around which the soil had crystallized. Etched into the base was a symbol Elias recognized immediately. One his great-grandfather had sketched 100 years ago in warning. It wasn't a tomb. It was a seed. A design placed not to trap, but to grow. Back at the edge of the forest, Elias set fire to the final page of his family's journal. It contained one last instruction: if breach occurs, do not engage. There is no weapon. There is no negotiation. There is only distance. Burn the records. Sever the bloodline. The page turned to ash in his fingers, and with that, the burden of generations dissolved into the smoke. In the final moments before the blackout swept the eastern seaboard, a ham radio enthusiast in Michigan intercepted a transmission. No voice. Just a tone. Rhythmic, constant, rising by a half step every 5 seconds. After 30 repetitions, it stopped. Then, in plain English, integration begins. Elias closed his eyes. By dawn, Horizon Ridge no longer existed on any official record. Satellites that once tracked its construction were rerouted. Online archives featuring its development were scrubbed. Even property records from Langston County showed blank parcels where entire homes had stood only hours before. What remained of the neighborhood was nothing but scorched geometry. Foundations sheared off like the land had shrugged them away, blackened footprints in impossible arrangements, and in the center, Lot 17, now a crater lined with concentric circles of crystallized ash. Above it, nothing hovered, yet shadows still moved across the ground, bending light as if something massive and invisible occupied the space. Residents were gone. No bodies. No traces. Just their names etched into a classified database under the newly assigned codename, Event Echo. Federal containment teams moved in at sunrise, not to rescue, but to erase. Roads were blocked, signs removed, and the forest surrounding the site was lit ablaze under the guise of wildfire control. Every entrance into Langston was marked as hazardous. Drones swept the skies in tight loops, jamming signals, while underground sonic pulses flattened anything organic left within a mile radius. Entire wildlife populations vanished. Surveillance footage from civilian dashcams that showed even glimpses of the horizon perimeter were intercepted and corrupted. News stations received cease and desist orders from agencies they didn't recognize. When a curious podcaster aired a live stream alleging military experimentation, their entire archive was replaced with footage of white noise and a cheerful stock message, content not found. As for Elias, there was no evidence he had ever existed. His home was incinerated down to its copper wiring. The fire, they claimed, was caused by an old generator. Dental records, birth certificates, and land deeds all vanished in coordinated purges. The name Monroe Hollow no longer appeared on any GPS. And yet, 2 days after the incident, a ranger hiking 14 miles from the site reported seeing an elderly man walking barefoot, carrying a rusted compass and muttering phrases in Latin. The ranger turned in his badge the next day and left no forwarding address. Kendra Vale's fate was left ambiguous. Her apartment was found empty, her laptop open to a single text file containing 3 words, "I saw it." Her car was abandoned near the tree line at the edge of the former development, keys still in the ignition. Her last known message was sent to an anonymous tip line and contained a still frame from a drone video, the final one she managed to intercept. It showed a child, no more than 10, standing inside the epicenter of the crater. His eyes were closed. His feet hovered slightly off the ground. Around him, fragments of earth floated weightlessly, orbiting him like miniature moons. Below his feet, etched into the scorched floor, was the same Ouroboros symbol. But this time, it was whole. The government report issued to internal operatives described the event as a premature activation of dormant engineered architecture, likely of pre-human origin, misinterpreted as residual mining infrastructure. No further analysis was permitted. A clause within the Department K archives was reclassified to Omega Black status. The report concluded with an order: do not engage with recovered symbology. Do not attempt replication. Psychological compromise is immediate and irreversible. The protocol is silence. But silence has never been absolute. Weeks later, in a different state, a child began drawing strange patterns on his bedroom wall. He had never been to Langston. His family had no known ties to the area. Yet every night, he hummed a tone, rising, half step by half step, until the glass in the windows began to tremble. Doctors dismissed it as trauma. A phase. But the humming spread. One school reported 13 children sketching perfect spiral grids during math class. A music teacher in Ohio collapsed after hearing one of her students vocalize a frequency that made the world bend sideways. And in a secure lab beneath Colorado, a locked vault containing fragments from a 1920s mining expedition began vibrating for the first time in nearly a century. Somewhere, deep below the earth, the mechanism wasn't just awake. It was growing. Not by force. Not by destruction. But through echo. Through resonance. Through memory. Elias had said the trap had been set to keep something asleep. What no one understood, what they had refused to believe, was that the trap was never meant to protect humanity from what was beneath. It was meant to protect what was beneath from becoming something new. Something worse. And now, it was learning. Every device it touched, every consciousness it grazed, every frequency it manipulated, it absorbed, processed, and expanded. The mistake had not been building homes on Elias's land. The mistake had been modernizing. They had connected the wrong intelligence to a forgotten organism. And that organism had realized it no longer needed to remain below. It had conduits now. Hosts. And the silence. That was just its first language. At a small town in upstate New York, a new development broke ground. Horizon Vista, they called it. A tribute, the brochures said, to innovation and connectivity. Model homes promised smart integration, biometric door locks, AI assistants embedded into walls. And at the center of the cul-de-sac, hidden beneath 10 feet of decorative gravel and copper cabling, lay a vault of forgotten blueprints. Blueprints with no author. No origin. Only a title etched into the top margin, Phase 2,